Hello and welcome to the France 24 interview. Our guest today is Carola Rackete. She is the captain of a rescue boat called the Sea-Watch 3, and she became world famous last June when she rescued over 50 migrants off the Libyan coast. After 2 weeks stranded at sea, she decided to bring them to the Italian port of Lampedusa, despite being barred from doing so by the then Interior Minister and far-right leader Matteo Salvini. Thank you very much for being with us today.
Thank you for inviting me here.
So you were arrested for a few days, then you were free. There is still a legal case pending against you in Italy. You are accused of essentially aiding illegal immigration and forcing your way into Italian waters. Do you fear ending in an Italian jail?
No, not at all. Because what happened was that bringing these people to a safe place after rescuing them is by the maritime law necessary. So a rescue at sea ends when you bring people to a safe port. So we broke a national law complying with an international one. For that reason, and because that makes sense, the judge in Italy let me go from the arrest. So while there are still investigations, we assume that they are going to be dropped
soon.
It can take a while. The legal system in Italy is definitely working. It's definitely independent. And we're pretty confident that it will be dropped, but it may take a while.
Matteo Salvini is also gone, so this may release political pressure on the case. This may favor you, maybe?
Possibly. However, I believe that the Italian legal system is completely independent.
I want to ask about those migrants. Obviously, they're not the only ones. They were rescued in the end. Do you know where they are today?
Yeah, we keep in touch with them occasionally, and we know a little bit about them. So it's now more than 2.5 months, and some of them are still stuck in Sicily in a reception center. And I largely blame the European Union for that as a whole. It's exactly the same problem the Italians have been dealing with since years, a lack of solidarity within the European Union. So while a lot of nice words have been spoken saying that France, Germany, for example, would take refugees and would take people in fact, not all of them have yet been transferred. 9 of them are in France. Mm-hmm. I think 9 of them are also in Finland, but the majority of them are still waiting in Sicily, and it's not clear when they're going to be transferred.
Right. This illustrates clearly the difficulties of Europe to trying to find a solution. There are a number of announcements. We're going to have an automatic system of dispatching them to different countries. Is this all talk and no action?
Well, this has been going on, I think, for a long time, and I think it roots back to what the European Union actually is. While we currently, particularly young people, I would say, would think it's really a union of values as well. In fact, it's come out of an economic union, and it still is predominantly an economic union when it gets to topics like that, where you're basically asking who is paying for it. So the Dublin III agreement, under which people at the moment are distributed, is in the favor of countries in Northern Europe. So they don't want to change it. And there's a lack of solidarity helping, for example, states like Greece, Italy, and Spain dealing with the influx of people when it happened. However, this continues even when the numbers now, this year and last year, are extremely low. Overall, what happened in the last years, we are talking about an amount of people which is 0.1% of the European population.
But isn't this proving the point that Matteo Salvini obviously pushed very hard, that we have to close off Europe to migrants, whoever they are, wherever they come from, and that it's actually working because the European Union had a naval operation to rescue them. They stopped. So now you have NGOs like you doing the job. But basically, the Europeans can say, well, we've stopped the flow, so we've solved the problem.
I think that explanation is a bit under-complex, because what is happening is that the European Union is financing the so-called Libyan Coast Guard, which has come from various militias, is known to be involved in human rights abuses in Libya. And these people, when they try to flee from Libya, a country at civil war, they are pushed back illegally to Libya. So we don't know what happens to people in Libya. We don't know how many people are dying
there
in Libya.
There are reports about slavery, about abuses. We know what happens in Libya, actually.
Yeah, that of course are the human rights abuses which people are fleeing from. This is why there's a push factor, why people go to sea.
So basically, if I'm following your reasoning, you're accusing the European Union of knowingly being complicit to a criminal activity, because they're paying the Coast Guards to put people in danger of human rights abuses. So Europe is complicit of all this.
Yes, this is definitely the case, and it has
it's
been
a crime.
ongoing.
That's called a crime.
It's a crime, and there's evidence being collected, and there are universities and lawyers working on collecting that evidence, and then there's cases being brought forward towards Italy and also towards the European Union, for sure.
But you know how the mood is in Europe. In Italy, obviously, because they were on the front line, if I may say, of this situation. You mentioned the lack of solidarity, but you see the mood even in countries like France, Germany, of course, since the 2015 decision by Angela Merkel. You see that the mood is, we don't want migrants, be it those who come as refugees or even more so economic migrants. So how do you deal with this and being still a continent that shows solidarity?
I think the issue is extremely polarized. We focus a lot on people who are very vocal saying that we don't want immigrants. But then there's a lot of solidarity. There's a lot of people who actually welcome migration.
But there are also lots of votes for the far right, including in your home country.
Yeah, there's some votes.
And it's this issue that's making people vote for that, no?
The issue, of course, is being abused. It's the fear of the unknown. In Germany, in particular, it's very much known that in the areas which have the lowest immigration, that's where people don't know migrants, really. Where there's white communities, predominantly white communities, that's the communities where the right wing is having the highest votes. Whereas, say, in cities and in places where there is a lot of migration, people are much more welcoming because they understand that any migrant, any refugee is just a person as they are.
What do you make of the accusation that your NGOs, like Sea-Watch and others, are complicit with the smugglers, that they're actually helping them, even helping their finances by bringing people to Europe? Well, it should be closed off. What's your response to the argument that not only Salvini has been making, the French Interior Minister also made the same remarks, and he's not from the same political party?
Well, as explained, people are leaving from Libya because it's a country at civil war, because of the human rights abuses which are happening. If we see the wider picture, if we are asking, why are people even migrating in the first place, we have to see the tremendous inequality in global income. We have to see poverty on a global level, and we have to see who is causing that, because it's still historic responsibility from, for example, countries like France creating the socio-economic conditions which lead to that. And that is ongoing. It's very visible in the power structures which remain until today when we are negotiating trade treaties, for example.
So you're saying essentially economic migration is something that you're in favor with, despite the fact that most Europeans, according to the polls, are against it.
What we have to see are the facts. A lot of people are migrating on this planet, and there will be even more with the environmental breakdown. However, most of the people are so poor, they are never gonna even cross a border. Most people migrate from rural areas to the slums of mega cities. For example, when their subsistence, their agriculture doesn't work out anymore due to the environmental breakdown, they go to the cities. Very few of them cross a border, and just really, really low percentage of people cross borders towards industrial nations.
The city of Paris wanted to award you and Pierre Camp, another sea captain who is also facing legal charges in Italy, with a Medal of Honor. Pierre Camp said she wouldn't accept it. What's your position?
well, my position is the same. Pia and I, she's a friend of mine, decided on it end of July already.
Why?
Because while I really welcome the step taken by the mayor of Paris, that in this moment when we were under attack as sea rescue organizations, she was, well, reaching out to us and showing support. But on the other hand, what I hear from migrants, from refugees living in the city of Paris, is that the conditions in Paris are still shocking and that the council really isn't doing enough to bring that forward. And the very general concept of giving someone a medal doesn't really help towards aiding the people who we're talking about. We shouldn't be talking about any white hero person. We should be talking about the people who have a need to rescue, who are suffering from terrible conditions, and we have to see them. They are the people who we are talking about, and these are the people who we need to speak to so much more when we're defining our migration policies.
I want to ask you maybe a more personal question. I know you're very concerned about the environment and that it's actually what you're working on, but you said recently that as a German, you felt or you still feel a special responsibility. And when you were on that boat, you said as a German, we have a special question to ask ourselves. What would I have done in the 1930s? When you were on that boat with those migrants, did you think I need to do the right thing morally, even though the law might be against me?
I think for many German people, that is a question they do ask themselves. What would I have done in those terrible times? Would I have been a person who would have followed the orders, or would I have done the moral right thing? Luckily, in this case, there isn't even a big choice because the international law and the morally right thing are exactly the same thing.
For you, it was obvious?
Yeah, obvious, yeah.
Okay. Carola Rackete, thank you very much for coming on the France 24 set. And thank you for watching this interview. Stay tuned for more news.